Welcome back, V.O.C. YouTube channel, college football. Didn't have videos last week. I was out of the state, had things going on. Didn't make videos. Still did my picks, so I will record my record. I think college I was 3-3. No NFL video this week either. Kind of caught up with some work things, but I will have that next week. Doing college this week. Very interesting title of this video, from what you could tell. Could we see 3 SEC teams in the playoff? It's not out of the realm. We've seen 2 in the past. The way the season's kind of going on, where the SEC has some very high quality teams at the top, could we see that? So I'm going to dive into that, the scenario that goes in with that, and then my picks for this week. Hopefully the video doesn't run too long, not trying to be too crazy. So I want to go through if we could see 3 SEC teams. So let's jump into it. As I said, 3 SEC teams, could we see it? I think we could see it in the playoffs. So right now you have Georgia at 1, Tennessee is 3, and Bama is 6. So the scenarios that happen, and right, looking at it, look, it's crazy to think people are not going to like it because it's 3 SEC teams. People are pissed when 2 SEC teams make it, especially up here in the Midwest. We don't like to see it. I don't really care. They're the best conference, so let the best conference have fucking more teams at the end of the day. So a 3 SEC team playoff. Georgia would have to be 1 loss to either Tennessee in the regular season or win against Tennessee in the regular season and lose to Alabama in the SEC championship game. So they are 1 loss. So they'll be 11-1. Tennessee would have to be 1 loss to either Georgia in the regular season or they beat Georgia in the regular season and lose to Alabama in the SEC championship game. Alabama, their only way to get in, they have to win out in the SEC championship game against Georgia or Tennessee. When Georgia, Tennessee play in a couple weeks, that's the de facto SEC East championship game, to where we know that team that wins that game is going to the SEC championship game. That's how it would have to be. Georgia with only 1 loss, Tennessee with only 1 loss, Alabama 1 loss, conference champ. This only can work if Alabama wins the conference championship game. The other teams, Michigan would have to be 1 or 2 losses, non-conference champ. Yeah, I'll state that again. Michigan, 1 or 2 losses, non-conference champ. Clemson, 1 or 2 loss. Them, most likely, the way it's kind of looking, they might be the ACC champ. Ohio State, undefeated. TCU, or you can actually add Oklahoma State into this, but TCU beat Oklahoma State. But a 1-loss Big 12 champ TCU. USC 1 loss, Pac-12 champ. That's how this thing would kind of work. So this is how the playoff would work with 3 SEC teams. Ohio State at 1, they'd be 13-0 Big 10 champs going into the playoff, which I think is very likely this is kind of the way it feels like to me. Like I said a couple weeks ago, Ohio State is the best team. They're the most complete team in college football. It looks like that every week. They play Penn State this week. We'll see how they do. So back to the scenario though. Ohio State, number 1, undefeated. Alabama would be 12-1 with the win over Tennessee/Georgia in the SEC championship. So they would be SEC champs. Tennessee or Georgia, you can flip-flop them. Tennessee 3, 11-1. They have the win over Alabama in the regular season and or the win over Georgia and only the loss to Alabama in the SEC championship game. Georgia, kind of the same way. Number 4, in this scenario, they have the win over Tennessee in the regular season, but they lose to Bama. You can vice versa. You can flip those up and down, whichever one. And then the other teams would look at number 5 Clemson would be 12-1 ACC champ, 11-2 ACC champ. USC would be, say you can change all these up. 6, they'd be 12-1 Pac-12 champ, 11-2 Pac-12 champ. TCU, 12-1 Big 12 champ, 11-2 Big 12 champ. And then Michigan would be there 11-1, no championships at all. It's very interesting because you look at it, you go, there's no way in hell they would pick two teams that didn't win the conference championship over teams that did win the conference championship. But I think the way the committee would look at it as, and the first playoff rankings are in a couple weeks, but I think they would look at it as SEC's best conference. These three teams kind of beat up on each other. So they'll look at it as Tennessee beat Alabama, and Alabama's the SEC champ. Why isn't Tennessee in there? And then they would look at Georgia and say, Georgia beat Tennessee. Who beat Alabama? Why wouldn't they be in? They would have the better wins, I think, if you look at this. Because you look at Clemson, what's their good win? Syracuse, NC State, Wake. Those wins aren't as good as a win over Alabama, a win over Tennessee, a win over Georgia. Then you go to USC. What win will they have? UCLA? Notre Dame's not going to be a good win. They lost to Utah. So it's one of those where it's like, they don't have a win that compares. TCU, same way. You beat Oklahoma State, not bad. But you just go down the line, it's not as great of wins as I think you have in the SEC. Because you can look at Alabama's schedule. Look at all the teams they've played. You look at Tennessee's schedule, all the teams they've played. You look at Georgia, all the teams they've played. It's one of those things where I think it's crazy to think about it happening. But if the dominoes fall, I think at the end of the day, it's going to be hard to say, how can we keep Tennessee out, who, to me, they're better than Clemson, they're better than USC, they're better than TCU, they're better than Michigan. And then how do you say, how do we keep Georgia out, who I think is better than Clemson, they're better than USC, they're better than TCU, and they're better than Michigan? How do you keep them out compared to those teams? It's baffling to think of. This is why expanded playoff needs to happen. But it's one of those things, it could very well happen. I wanted to bring it up. I thought about it today as I was sitting at work, and I was just thinking about, could this work? Could it happen? It could very well happen. It's crazy to think. It's one of those things where you get laughed at thinking about it, but at the end of the day, it's not out of the realm of possibility from it happening. If everything falls in the way, they all have just one loss. Boom, we're sitting here like, this isn't that crazy to think. Alabama just has to win out. Georgia, Tennessee, say Georgia beats Tennessee, that's only Tennessee's only loss of the year. They sit there, they don't play in the SEC championship game as a one-loss team. Georgia goes to the SEC championship game as undefeated. They lose to Alabama. You have three teams in the SEC with one loss. It's not crazy to think about. All right, moving on to my picks this week. I'm 33-25. I was doing great until about 2 weeks ago. The last 2 weeks have kind of just railed me. Hopefully we can get back on the stretch this week and keep going up. We're still over 500, but still it's not as good as what it once was. Let's get back there. Number 2, Ohio State. They're 15.5-point favorite at number 13, Penn State. Penn State plays Michigan a couple weeks ago. They get embarrassing. I had higher hopes. I picked them to win it. They were leading at halftime. Then they got in a fight, and they showed they're not dogs. I think at home, this is where these noon games for Fox, they're nice. Fox is getting viewers from ESPN, but it's like, I think you kind of hurt the atmosphere of the game a little bit. If this was a night game, you'd be like, man, Penn State has a shot to win this. It's not. So I'm going to go with Ohio State. It'll be interesting to see if they cover and how much they can score. Just because I think Penn State has some decent corners, but Ohio State's wide receivers, as we know, they're just way too dominant. Number 9, Oklahoma State at number 22, Kansas State. Kansas State is minus 1.5-point favorite. I've done this the last couple weeks. I'm like, I think the better team is the underdog. Win. I've gotten burned on it, but to me, Oklahoma State's a better team than Kansas State. That's why I'm going with Oklahoma State to win this game. It's one of those where I look at it and I go, I'm nuts. It's burned me, but it's too good to pass up. This game as well. Number 20, Cincinnati at UCF. UCF is a minus 1.5-point favorite. This game is a little interesting because Cincinnati has that loss to Arkansas early in the year, and then we kind of forgot about them. They're slowly trickling their way back up. This game's crazy to look at and say, you got to go this way, I want to go that way. I'm going to go with Cincinnati. I'll probably get burned on it, but I like Cincinnati in this game. All right, number 19, Kentucky at number 3, Tennessee. Tennessee is a minus 12-point favorite. This game is going to be tough. It's going to be a little bit closer than people think, but I like Tennessee to win it. It's just one of those games where it's like, it's a rivalry game. Kentucky's going to come to play. They have a decent quarterback. Can he keep him in the game, Ken Levis? I don't know if he can. He's burned us in the past if you bet with him. It'd be interesting to watch, but it'd just be interesting to see how Tennessee handles being this good and being this talked about. Because like I said, when they played Alabama, they haven't been here before. How are they going to handle that? Number 15, Ole Miss, minus 2-point favorite at Texas A&M. I brought this game up because is this the game, if they lose, Jimbo Fisher gets fired? This guy, Jimbo Fisher, has been awful at Texas A&M. His record is the same through the same amount of games as Kevin Sumlin. They fired Kevin Sumlin 4 years ago. Jimbo, it just shows that it doesn't matter if you've won a title before, if you've recruited great, which he just had his best recruiting class last year. So a lot of these kids are young, but number one recruiting, it doesn't matter. If you can't understand your team, if you don't have the quarterback right, it's going to hurt you in the long run. Ole Miss lost last week. They burned me, but I'm going to go back on the Lane train. That's why I'm going with Ole Miss to win this game. I just wanted to bring it up because is this the game where they pay Jimbo $96 million to walk out of the door? All right, last game. Pitt at number 21, North Carolina. I brought this game up because North Carolina has one loss to Notre Dame, but that's their only loss. They have just been trugging along. As of right now, they're going to the ACC championship game against Clemson. Could Pitt spoil that a little bit? I don't think that's going to happen. I like North Carolina to win this game and to have us thinking, man, there's teams that we don't talk about because they lost the game, but they've slowly built their way back up, and they're pretty good teams. North Carolina is one of those teams. Cincinnati is one of those teams. But like I said, I wanted to talk about could we get 3 SEC teams in the playoff? I thought it was wacky to think about. It is nuts to think about. But I wanted to bring it to the attention of, could it happen? If all the dominoes fall in the right place, it could happen. Watch this be a topic on ESPN, and I just look like the smartest person ever. So thanks for watching. That's going to do it for this video.